That evening, I was sitting at my desk working when my phone suddenly vibrated. A message from someone I know popped up. "Can we talk in a bit?" I saw the message, replied with, "Sure," and then went back to work. About 10 minutes later, that person called. The tone of their voice sounded irritated right from the start. "Why didn't you respond to my message earlier?" I froze for a moment. I was about to explain that I had been busy, that I actually did reply, but before I could say anything, they continued. "Never mind, it's nothing. Talk when you're free." Then the call ended rather abruptly. I put the phone down, sat there quietly for a while. There was this strange feeling building up inside me, an uneasy sensation that was hard to describe. I kept thinking back to that call, wondering if I had done something wrong, even though I knew I had not. My body felt tense, like something had touched a sensitive spot deep inside me. It was just a few words, but somehow, I felt different afterward. And that was when I realized these kinds of reactions are not something only I experience. A lot of people go through the same thing in their everyday lives. If you recognize this in yourself, then let's walk through each sign, one by one, that may show you possess an incredibly rare personality type. Let's begin with the first sign. Sign number 1. You experience emotions with great depth. This kind of reaction happens because, during communication, the brain processes multiple layers of information at the same time. Beyond just the words being said, it also picks up on the tone of voice, pace of response, vocal inflection, facial expressions, and how consistent the emotion seems with the message being spoken. These signals are processed very quickly, almost automatically. And when something feels off, your body gives off a soft warning signal before your thoughts can even catch up. For people who are wired this way, that feeling shows up quite clearly. They often sense a shift in someone else's mood or energy, even without intentionally analyzing or overthinking anything. That is why even in a simple, everyday conversation, they may feel tired or uncomfortable sooner than others, even if everything on the surface seems fine. In daily life, this kind of reaction often gets labeled as being too sensitive or overthinking. But in terms of how the nervous system works, it is actually a way of processing information where emotions and context are registered by the brain very early on, long before anything is clearly expressed in words. And that is the first sign I want to share with you. Some people are extremely quick at picking up on emotional or behavioral changes in others, even through tiny details, a slight pause in someone's voice, a shorter than usual reply, or a silence that lingers just a little too long. These signals often fly right by most people, but for you, they stand out. Your internal system automatically detects them, even if you are not consciously paying attention. Sign number 2. You need more time to process after social interactions. For people who are emotionally attuned to others, finishing a conversation does not always mean it is over. The feelings picked up during that interaction tend to stick around in the mind, even once the conversation has ended. I remember one time after a short phone call that seemed pretty normal. I hung up and went back to work. But just a few minutes later, the last thing the other person said popped back into my head. I was not trying to recall it. It just surfaced, then slowly faded out, like a task that had just been completed. For those who process things deeply, the brain runs on what you could call an extended processing mode. During a social interaction, it takes in not only the content of the conversation, but also emotions, tones, and the relational meaning behind it all. This happens mainly in the limbic system, the part of the brain responsible for emotions and social bonding. And this process needs time to finish. If the conversation ends faster than the brain's processing speed, the brain will continue holding on to the experience until the emotional and contextual pieces have been sorted out. During that time, the body remains in a light state of alertness. This often feels like an unsettled mind, or a need to mentally wind down. In psychology, This is tied to what is called deep social processing. The brain is wired to complete the emotional and relational meaning of an interaction before it can truly close the experience. When living in a fast-paced world, this trait means you simply need more time than others to fully process and move on from an interaction. This is the second sign. You require more time to wrap up a social exchange because your nervous system keeps processing the emotions and context until everything has been internally resolved. Only once that has happened, your mind can finally rest. Sign number 3. You need time alone to reset after social stimulation. There have been times when I was sitting in what seemed like a very normal group, gathering a team meeting, or a dinner with a few familiar people. Everything was flowing just fine, the conversation continued, but after a little while, I started feeling noticeably drained. My body was still there, still listening, but my mind felt tense, my responses slowed down, and a strong need for quiet began to rise within me. That feeling appears because, in those environments, your nervous system is working overtime. It is not just the back and forth talking. It is the emotional state of each person, the overall atmosphere, and the constant stream of subtle social cues. If you tend to process things deeply, these signals do not simply pass through you, take them in and process them one by one. Over time, that data builds up and your body starts to signal that it needs to pause and reduce the stimulation. At that point, the fatigue is not about disliking, socializing, or being bored by people. It is because your nervous system has been working at high intensity for too long and needs to return to a calm state in order to reset. That is why the urge to be alone comes up as a natural reflex. It is your body's way of recovering and finding balance again. And this is the third sign. You regularly need quiet time to allow your nervous system to recalibrate itself, especially after extended social interaction, even if, on the outside, everything seemed perfectly fine. Sign number 4. You can sense early on when your life is out of sync. Sometimes, things, places, or ways of living can make you feel uncomfortable on the inside, even if, from the outside, everything appears perfectly normal. Take this example. I once had a pretty stable job. It had a clear schedule, I was capable of doing it, and everyone around me thought it was a good fit. Every day, I showed up and got my work done. But the longer I stayed, the heavier I began to feel. Every morning, I had to push myself a little harder just to start the day. That feeling was very specific. My focus slowly faded. My excitement dropped. Tasks I used to do with ease now took much more effort. It felt like I was constantly forcing myself to stay in rhythm, even though everything seemed fine on the surface. And the longer it went on, the clearer the feeling became. This happens because our body and nervous system are constantly reacting to how well our life fits who we are. When someone is in an environment or role that is not truly aligned with them, their body has to strain to adapt. That tension is quiet, but it drains energy day by day. Common symptoms include ongoing fatigue, loss of motivation, and difficulty maintaining long-term stability. These signals tend to appear before your mind can fully identify what is wrong. You might not be able to explain exactly what feels off, but your body already knows the current rhythm is wearing you down. And when that state lasts too long, pausing and adjusting becomes necessary. Over time, through repeated experiences like this, a pattern begins to emerge, the ability to sense, quite early, when your life is falling out of sync. All it takes is staying in the wrong situation for a little too long, and your body starts signaling it through heaviness, low energy, and difficulty keeping up. And these very signals are what eventually lead people back toward the choices that allow them to live more lightly and sustainably. Sign number 5. You have a strong need for a life of meaning. There was a period when my life was running on a stable routine. The job was steady. My daily schedule was clear. Every day looked just like the one before. Everything got done, but in quiet moments, when there was nothing demanding my attention, a simple question kept rising in my head. Why am I doing all of this? That question was not stressful, but it came up often enough that I could not ignore it. This reaction happens because once basic needs are met, the mind in some people automatically shifts into searching for purpose. In brains wired this way, there needs to be a sense of connection between daily actions and personal values. When that connection is missing, the body creates a feeling of emptiness. And that feeling serves as a signal that the current path might not be touching what truly matters to you. This mechanism has a direct impact on life energy. When what you do feels meaningful, your focus and stamina increase noticeably. When that meaning fades, your energy drops quickly, even if your schedule and workload stay the same. That sense of emptiness forces you to stop and reevaluate your direction. And so, the fifth sign becomes clear. You feel a deep inner need to live a meaningful life. Only when you understand what you are working for and why you are living the way you do, can you maintain energy over the long haul. Without that sense of purpose, energy tends to disappear, no matter how steady your external life may look. Sign number 6. You quickly feel when an old environment no longer fits you. What once felt enough to keep things stable starts to feel too small. Here is a simple example. I kept living inside the same familiar routine. Coming home in the evening, eating dinner, turning on the television, scrolling through my phone, and having the usual small talk with the same people. Everything was just like it had always been. But over time, I realized I no longer felt like participating. The same daily conversations started to wear me out. I would sit at the same table, listen to the same topics, but inside, I felt like I was standing on the outside looking in. There was no conflict, but there was no connection either. That feeling comes from the inside changing, while the outer routines stay the same. As your thinking and worldview evolve, your emotional needs shift as well. Your brain starts craving more depth in conversations, more meaning in your experiences. And when those familiar habits no longer fulfill those needs, your nervous system creates a sense of tightness and discomfort to signal that your current rhythm no longer fits. Psychologically, this is a sign of stepping into a new phase of growth. Each phase calls for a different environment and way of living. When your internal growth moves faster than your external surroundings, you start to feel out of sync even during the most normal daily routines. Sign number 7. Your presence affects other people. And once you have grown used to not staying tied to old frameworks for too long, you may start to notice a very subtle shift in your daily interactions. It is nothing dramatic, but it shows up in how people respond when they are around you. This is easiest to see in short, casual conversations. For example, when sitting down for coffee with friends, sharing a meal with coworkers, or even chatting for a few minutes outside someone's house. I do not try to steer the conversation, offer advice, or analyze anything. Most of the time, I just listen and respond naturally, saying a few simple things that reflect how I honestly feel in the moment. But in those ordinary moments, the person sitting across from me often starts to open up. They talk about stress at work, tension at home, or personal thoughts they rarely share. Some people sigh with relief afterward and say, "I have not talked like that in a long time." Others reach out a few days later, telling me that something we discussed helped them reflect on a big decision in their life. The interesting thing is, I never try to lead the conversation in any direction. I do not act like I have all the answers or try to fix their problems. I am simply fully present, truly listening, and responding in a way that feels real and unforced. The reason this happens lies in a person's inner state. When someone is living in honesty with their own thoughts and feelings, their inner rhythm tends to be steady and consistent. That internal stability quietly creates a sense of safety for the other person. And when people feel safe, they naturally speak more honestly, open up more, and often start seeing themselves more clearly. From a psychological point of view, emotional and mental states can be contagious. When someone is around a person with a calm and steady inner world, their own nervous system tends to dial down the stress. And when stress lowers, clarity increases, and change begins to happen, naturally and without pressure. From these kinds of experiences, sign number 7 becomes clear. People who carry this trait often influence others simply by being present. They do not need to talk a lot or teach anyone anything, yet those around them still feel heard, understood, and sometimes even begin to change the way they see themselves. Sign number 8. You feel like you are not living up to your full potential. After realizing that your presence alone can impact others, a different kind of shift begins to happen this time. It turns inward. When you are no longer busy listening or responding to other people, your mind starts asking questions about your own life. This feeling shows up clearly in very familiar situations. You are still going to work, still completing your tasks, and everything seems normal. But some mornings, as you wake up, a short thought quietly appears in your head. How long am I going to live like this? It is not loud or overwhelming, but it repeats just often enough that you cannot ignore it. This mindset usually arrives once someone has moved past the stage of simply wanting stability and starts needing a clearer direction for their life. At this point, the mind is no longer satisfied with just fulfilling responsibilities or keeping up routines. It starts looking for a connection between what you do each day and the person you want to become. When that connection is not clear, a natural sense of emptiness begins to form. From a psychological standpoint, this is a stage where the need for self-direction becomes more defined. The brain begins to care about the long-term meaning of your life, not just short-term goals. And when that question has no clear answer yet, the body and emotions generate a subtle urge that pushes you to slow down and think more seriously about your path. Sign number 9. You feel mentally drained when you are not living true to yourself. There comes a time when that feeling of lacking direction no longer stays just in your mind. It starts to show up in your body, very clearly. Your energy drops noticeably, even though your daily routine has not really changed. This shows up first in your physical state. You are still going to work, still doing what needs to be done, and nothing major has happened. But every morning, you wake up already feeling tired. It is not the kind of tiredness that comes from lack of sleep or overworking. It is a heaviness that is there right at the start of the day. Everything you do requires more effort than before. And even by the end of the day, after resting, you still do not feel recharged. In reality, this is what happens when you keep living in a way that no longer matches your inner growth. When you have already realized that change is necessary, but you keep holding on to the old rhythm, your mental energy gets used up just trying to maintain the status quo. That effort is constant, silent, and slowly wears you down every day. On a neurological and psychological level, the body cannot stay in that state forever. When misalignment lasts long enough, mental exhaustion shows up as a clear warning signal. It forces you to slow down, because if you keep living the same way, burnout becomes inevitable. And from that pattern of signs, the 9th one reveals itself. You are more likely to feel mentally drained when you are not living in alignment with who you really are. It is not laziness. It is not lack of willpower. It is simply a natural response from your body when your current life no longer nourishes the person you are becoming inside. And so, we have just walked through 9 signs that may point to the fact that you carry an incredibly rare personality type. If you have listened this far and found parts of yourself in some of these signs, what is important to understand is that these states all have very real causes. They show up when your inner self has evolved, but your way of living on the outside has not caught up. That mismatch creates fatigue, tension, and a subtle unease in everyday life. Many people in this situation tend to blame themselves. They think they are too sensitive, too complicated, or just not good at adapting. But if you take a closer look, these reactions are actually signs that your inner system is trying to adjust to a new stage of growth. When those signals are ignored for too long, they start to pile up, and they will eventually take a toll on your mental energy. What truly matters at this stage is understanding what is going on inside you. When you understand why you are tired, why you feel out of rhythm, and why familiar patterns no longer bring you a sense of peace, you will begin to feel less pressure about how you see yourself. That understanding allows you to pause at the right time and adjust your pace to something that fits you better. This video was created to help you put words to certain psychological experiences that are very common but often overlooked. And once those experiences are seen clearly, caring for your emotional life becomes much lighter and more doable. If, while watching, there were moments that felt familiar to you, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. And if you are going through a psychological state that you cannot quite name yet, you can leave that too. I will choose some of those questions to explore further in future videos. Thank you for staying with me until the end. I look forward to seeing you again in the next videos.